Greetings, bloggers, vloggers, followers, and potters. Dustin here from Dustin's Dynasty with another edition of this week's vlog. If you haven't met me already, my name is Dustin. I'm 40 now. I'm autistic and I have some other mental health challenges. And I've been living on my own for almost 7 years. And I've had a part-time job for over 15 years. So life is pretty good when you have autism, depending on how you look at it. Today, we're going to take a quick glimpse into that. And one of the things I think that is key in my mental health recovery that I have not seen for a very, I have not, I guess I've known it, but I guess I've really not come to terms with it, I think, until earlier this year. And kind of the reason why I give the reason for the title of this vlog, Pointless and Destructive, was because for 6 of the past 7 years of living independently, I had lived a pointless and destructive life. I had not seen I had this idea, and you can go through the different vlogs and see where, I had some relapses of my mental health medication. Well, I had always understood that mental health medication, there was no shame in it. And, despite being autistic, there is a need for mental health medication because of other disorders that I have, like bipolar disorder and anxiety. The reality is, I still have those things, even though at one time I believed I didn't. And even after first establishing that about 6 years ago, it still wasn't until this year that I really came to terms with understanding the need for medication and, how destructive and pointless it really was, and how other people had seen how I was declining in my mental state. And, it's a wonder, maybe I'm a faithful person, even though it may not seem it. But I believe that God was always watching over me, even in those instances, just as He was in those days when 25 years ago when we were trying to find the right cocktail of psychotropic medication that worked for me. And, maybe it takes to see words like pointless and destructive, or understanding that there's norms and reality that have to be followed for you to have things that like to require you to live on your own, and things that prevent you from being involved in a mental health hospital, or in a local acute mental health um psychiatric unit, or maybe even being involved with the law system because you're not thinking logically, you're not thinking clearly. And for me, for the longest time, I guess I had no perception of reality because I thought I was this person who could grab the world by the ass, quite frankly, and do whatever he pleased. And it didn't matter how much I was hurting myself. I thought in that moment, because I was not meant and my mental faculties were not there, that it didn't matter what anybody else thought. It didn't matter, you know, what what others were caring and concerned about. All that mattered was that I was in my best spirit. But what I didn't realize within myself was that I was hurting other people and worrying those who cared about me, who showed genuine care, and people who were there for me for the right reasons, for understanding, for being there for the right reasons. And I think, for me to get back on the wagon, so to speak, once and for all, it took watching YouTube. And I know autistic people sort of like YouTube, and I think it's not only just autistic people, but it's people around the world who have to look for somebody to model. And some of the biggest people for me, and one of the biggest, I would say, is the TV show Shameless. Now, I haven't seen it, from episode from start to finish because it's a Prime episode, and I haven't got there yet, but I will someday, maybe. But one of the characters, Ian Gallagher, and He's gay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've always said, that's there was a time I thought it was gay, but that's beside the point. But him and his boyfriend, his boyfriend sticks through it and puts up with all the mania and all the things, and then there is a certain compilation video that somebody makes about taking your meds and the struggle when somebody asks you, are you taking your medicine? Are you taking care of yourself? Those sort of things. And, for the longest time, that would irritate me so much because people had a hard time believing me. And maybe I wasn't honest. Maybe I was. People, but it's a different mindset when you're in a better place, when you've been more steady with it. And, I think the thing about, even those watching those clips, and I'll include those in the description today, but I think, you know, being honest with yourself and taking care of yourself, because people can read through the lines, so to speak, when you're not taking care of your mental health, when you're not being the person that they know that you can really be, the person that you can flourish and be. And granted, bipolar disorder and its own set of manias, how it has this potential to just go into complete extremes, but eventually you crash and you burn. And two times before, I had to learn that the hard way. And I don't want to live like that anymore. That's not the person that I want to be. And I know that. It's been a long road to understand that. And, things like, that are set in place for reasons. Sometimes there are reasons that, you know, aren't for you, or maybe are not even because of you, but maybe because of others, and they put you on edge because you have this sense of, oh, is it me? Is it the, you know, is it because of me? And so on and so forth. And it makes you really think about, why it's important, even though I've known why it's important and I've been doing it, but it drives it home more. It is what is in my honesty of understanding that, you're continuing to see the signs. And I'm a firm believer also, back to faith real quick for one moment, that, you know, if God brings signs to you, God opens doors, closes doors, things like that. And sometimes it's just, a note, or maybe a memo, or an instruction that, you have to do this, or this is what we want you to do. And me, of course, autistic, and like many autistic people, being a rule follower of sorts, we want to follow the rules, right? So we do it. And, sometimes it teaches us a lesson that we have to do what's right, even though we know it's right. We've been doing it. And even when the temptation arises that we want to think differently about it, we know that there are norms in this world that we may want to say F you to, or, think they're not right. But in reality, they are right. They're the things that make us keep us together, keep us together, those routines that we as autistic people thrive on, and keep us going. And that is what I need. I think I know I need a routine. Um, Routine is something that is something that autistic people thrive off of, and I need that, not only because I'm autistic and I need to know the who, what, when, where, and why of things, but because it's good for my mental health too. It gets me out of bed, keeps me going, and not giving in to those temptations of saying, oh, I'll just sleep it off and whatever happens, happens. Well, life doesn't happen that way. Life sets you up for acting in ways that are pointless and destructive, and not being yourself in a place that no one wants you to see, and they see how pointless and destructive you really are acting, and they don't want to see it. But and even if they're not literally telling you, and I know as autistic people, it can be hard to read that and understand to read through the lines, even though they're not telling you that you're acting different. You can sometimes read it, and I think for me, it was just from my breaking point to understand that I need to take care of my mental health, and that includes medication adherence. That people can read through the lines, people can understand when I'm not myself, and I have to be the adult in the situation. Yes, medication is there. Medication is intended in some way to help me as an autistic person. I know what from past relapses what happens when I don't take my medicine. I know how I act. And I don't honestly ever want to get to that place again. And there are times I felt like I wanted to do a giant F you and say, I don't want to be in the mood to deal with things or knowing when things are, happening or wrong. But in the end, it's again, point back to those words, pointless and destructive. It hurts people. It makes people think differently. And I guess I never wanted when 2025 hit, I was just tired of playing a game that I didn't think I was never winning. And it didn't matter how many times I played it, what variation I played it at. It never worked. And it was pointless and destructive. And people knew when I was playing that game. And I was tired of fighting a fight that I was masking myself from, and experiencing these withdrawal symptoms that were very painful in a way, and I was hiding them because I thought I knew better. I thought I knew more than the world, and that I was top on top of the world. But what I really knew was that was a sign of my mental health disorders, and thinking, that the world, it makes my brain think different. It's all in how the brain works. And it was making me believe things that were just not true. And, there's also the reality that because of the one medication that was bothering me that I was against for so long, and I believed this or that or the other thing about it, my brain was flawed and it thought those things, and I was unwilling to accept, and I accepted them before I accepted what was really the truth. And I proved those things. I took 6 years to prove those things, but they weren't true. And it didn't matter if they were or not. But what mattered the most was that I was caring for my mental health, that I was really the person that could be depended on, that could be trusted, that wasn't the one who was always sporadic, out of control, not with it together. You know, people can see through that, and it really shows who you are when you don't take care of yourself on top of everything else. And it makes people question, it makes people concerned. And it hurts when people think you are concerned because it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like shit. And if I have to be quite frank with myself. And I think sometimes, over the past few years, and one of the hardest conversations I had to have was with someone at work when I realized I was relapsing, and they saw it. And I think a goal of mine was never to have that conversation in the workplace ever again. And, even because they seen it so well, because they were trained so well, they know people so well, they're in the business of knowing people and helping people, that they knew something was wrong. And it made me realize I never wanted to get to that point in my mental health journey to where I had to be questioned, that I wasn't taking care of myself and that I wasn't myself. It hurt me. It tore apart at me. And that I think that was the what that started the path to progress. But eventually that you get to see these signs more and more. And I know I don't like to talk about faith a lot, but part of it was having faith and going to church and, starting to see these signs that I needed to reel myself in and take care of myself. And it's even if it is watching those YouTube videos so that they bring things in a way that show that people care, even if it is acted out or played out in a way, it shows how love can be given and love can be had so that you can so I can understand that even though, I'm a flawed person, I have these illnesses. I don't even like to use the word illnesses like bipolar, like anxiety, like autism. You know, Despite all that, I know there's people out there who care about me, who love me for who I am. And even though, you know, at times it can seem like, it can be hard to get it together or understand the why and the how behind things. It is sometimes what gets me going or what keeps me going or lets me see the why and how we need to do X, Y, and Z, not only for myself, but for others around me, people I work with, programming, those sort of things, and why and how they are important now more than ever. And as we are in an ever-changing world and autistic people struggle with change, that too is a reality, and that I have to be my best to understand how to work with myself in those realms and those ways of understanding, to know how things are challenging for me, and that things like medication help with that, and it doesn't make me and that doing things like being pointless and event that are pointless and eventually cause me to be distracting me don't help with a situation that I need help to with things that medication will provide so that I can be my best self in an environment that isn't always made for me and that could be subject to things that I may not agree with, or may not get along with, or may have trouble coping with, and may need to cope with in my own way. So eventually, through all of that, through all the changes that have been happening, it helps me understand those things a little better and be my best self because I know I have to be, even though it hurts sometimes. And it's getting rid of those flawed thoughts and understanding, the why and the how behind why it's not good to do things that are pointless and destructive, along with learning for those examples and knowing that it's okay to be who I am. It's okay to be not to be okay. And it's good to know that, those things. So, I want to close today by letting you know that you are loved, you matter, you are enough. And if you haven't already, be sure to give this a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and X at Dustin's Dynasty. I'm on the web. That address is dustinsdynastyusa.com. And I'm on Linktree, where I have a host of my podcasting platforms and my links to my socials and my website, as well as my newsletter. That's under Dustin's Dynasty under Linktree. Again, I want to thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there and stay warm, stay cool, and hydrate. We'll talk at you soon. Bye for now.